All right, let's go over how to create a tab menu in Flex and then how to set it up so it is fully responsive across all of your variants. The main things we're going to need to understand are object states, fill sizing, and themes and styles, because we're going to be using all of those quite a bit as we create the tab menu itself. I'm using a dark gray background for my canvas, but set yours up however you need. The first thing I'm going to do is add a new heading 4 text style. It's a custom text style that I created, and I'm going to add the title for my first tab option. Next, I'll change the color to white so you can actually see it on this dark gray background. With the text box selected, I'll change its width and height both to fit content. Then, with it selected, I'm going to add it to a new group, and I'll change the name of the group to tab 1 in the layers panel. Once that's done, I'm going to add a background fill to the group. Now change this color to whatever color you want the button to be when someone has clicked on this option in your tab menu. So I'm going to change mine to this darker gray. Once you've done that, select it and add an object state to the group itself, and you're going to want it to be a hover state. Change the color of the group to whatever color you want it to be when someone hovers over this option. Next, I'm going to duplicate this group and change the titles for each of the tab options in my tab menu. Now you can see I've made multiple copies, I've changed the titles within the tabs, and I've changed the names respectively in the layers panel. Next thing you're going to want to do is select all of the tabs on the canvas and then add them to a group. I'm going to name this group tab bar, and then I'm going to set its layout to be a row. I'll center it both vertically and horizontally, and then I'm going to change the width to a fixed size of probably about 68 pixels, and then the width a fixed size of about 1100 pixels. Now this is going to change later on, but it just kind of gives you a reference point for what you want your tab bar to look like. So now I have each of these tabs within the tab bar, so let's have them fill the space. So this is where it gets pretty cool. So I'm going to select each of the tabs in the layers panel, and I'm going to change their width to fill, and I'm going to change their height also to fill. And then I'm going to center the text within them both vertically and horizontally. So now you can see it's actually starting to look like a tab menu. So since I have 4 tabs within this group, each of them are going to take up 25% of the available space within the group itself. So that takes out all the guessing games and the manually adding up sizing when you want things to be equally distributed across a container. I'm going to add a border radius of 100 pixels to each of the tabs, so they're rounded like that. And then I'm going to select the tab bar group in the layers panel, and then I'm going to reduce its gap from 20 pixels to 10 so they're just closer together. Then with the group still selected, I'm going to add some padding around all sides of the container of just about 5 pixels. So that adds some separation from the border of the group and the content within it. I'll also add a stroke, and I'll change its color to white. And then with that set, I'll also add a border radius of 100 pixels to match the content within. So now you see I've got something that's starting to actually look like a tab menu. As I resize the container, you can see that the content within it dynamically shifts too. The next thing I'm going to do is going to seem a little odd at first, but it will make sense down the road. So select tabs 2 through 4 in the layers panel, and in the inspectors panel where you see background fill, select hide fill. So that way only one of them is visible. All right, so switching over to preview mode, you can see that this tab menu is actually starting to take shape. The next thing I'm going to do is add the content to the canvas that I want to show with each of the tabs. All right, so I've added 4 groups of content that I have labeled tab content in the layers panel, 1 for each tab, and I have them lined up like this. What content you include in your tab menu is completely dependent on what you're trying to create, but for me, I wanted some text with a simple graphic. I'm going to select all the content groups in the layers panel, and then I'm going to group them together and make a master group called tab content. I'll assign a column layout to this group so that everything is lined up in a singular column. And then I'll also change the width to a relative 100%. So your layout should look something like this now. You've got your tab bar here, and then each section of content stacked in a single group called tab content. The next thing to do is to add a blank section to the canvas. And this section I'm going to call tab section. Pull it to the top of the layers panel, and and then take both tab bar and tab content and pull it into tab section. With tab section selected, you're going to change it to a column layout. You'll select the content within and change their position to stack. It might look a little alarming at first, but just select tab section again and change its height to fit content. Next, I'm going to vertically and horizontally center the content. Then I'm going to add a little bit of gap or separation between the two groups within the section. Then with the sections still selected, I'm going to add some padding on the top, bottom, left, and right. All right, with that set up, I'm going to open the tab content group in the layers panel and hide tab 2, 3, and 4 content. So your section should now look something like this. The first tab is selected and the first tab content is showing. This is essentially your default state of your tab module, or what it looks like when a user first views it. So we need to set up states for when each of the different tabs are selected. To do so, I'm going to select the section in the layers panel, and then over in object states, I'm going to add a custom state. And I'll change the title to state 2. I'll then open the tab bar group, select tab 1, and hide its background fill. Select tab 2, and then show its background fill. Similarly, I will hide tab 1 content, and then I will show tab 2 content. And then I'll select finish editing. So I essentially had just set up the second state of the section, or what it will look like when the second tab menu has been selected. So I'll go ahead and do the same for 3 and 4. All right, so my section now has 4 states. My default state with the first tab's content showing, my second state with the second tab's content showing, and same with 3 and 4. So the next thing I need to do is set up the interactions that trigger the state changes. Because I want this section to change to state 2 when someone selects the second tab option, I'll select tab 2 in the tab bar group, go to animate mode, add a new interaction. I'll select target state, and then as the target layer, I will select the tab section in the layers panel. I'll change the target state to state 2, and then the trigger to on click. Previewing this, when I select the second tab, it should switch everything to the second state. So I'll go ahead and do the same thing for states 3 and 4. So sort of working in reverse order, with the first tab selected, I'm going to add an interaction that changes the target state of the tab section to its default state on click. So now when I go to preview, my tab module works. All right, so it's set up and it's working properly. So now let's configure it so it's responsive across all of my variants. The first thing I'll do is select the tab bar group and change its width to a relative 100%. Then with it still selected, I'm going to add a maximum width of 1100 pixels. You can set this to be whatever you want. You can even have it remain full width if you'd like, but I like the sizing and the proportions that I've set up here. So looking across my variants, things look like they are set up and working properly. So let's double check by previewing. Going to preview mode, things seem to be scaling perfectly until I get really small and then it starts to squish. Of course, a screen size will probably never be that small, but we should set it up regardless. It's a pretty simple fix. With the tab bar still selected, we're going to add a minimum width, and I'm going to set that minimum width of a fixed 340 pixels. So now let's check out how the responsiveness is working. A key tip for creating responsive tab menus is ensuring that your text styles within the tab bar scale appropriately. At the start, I used the heading 4 text style. As you can see on desktop, it's a size 24, tablet, it's a 16. On mobile, it's a 12, which is substantially smaller, but that makes sense considering that I'm working with such a smaller screen. So it'll just take a little bit of trial and error as you're setting up your text styles to make sure that they fit according to your design language and your branding. Similarly, you're going to want to set up the tab content itself so it scales appropriately across all of your responsive breakpoints and variants. The last little thing that I did was added a headline to the top just to cap off the section. And then as you can see, things are looking real good, and previewing it, everything is working responsively. And that's how you create a tab module in Flex.